right. Well, welcome. We are very excited today to be able to welcome YWCA Spokane as part of our October Domestic Violence Awareness Month programming and our Action Week programming as part of our recognition and support of the stories of survivors and victims of sexual violence and other forms of relationship violence. So today we are going to be having a discussion about the relationship and culture surrounding relationship and sexual violence, and certainly how we can work towards a cultural change and the elimination of relationship and other forms of sexual violence. I would note relationship violence does not discriminate. It can happen to anyone, any person at any time. Therefore, it is really important that we work as a community to spread awareness and understanding of the prevalence of intimate partner and relationship violence. As members of a campus community, when we become more aware of our campus and community culture, including who relationship violence affects the most and how to stop it, we'll succeed in being able to help create an environment where all students can safely pursue their education and work towards achieving their goals. So my name is Shannon Ketchum. I am the manager of student programs at Spokane Community College. I oversee awareness and prevention education programming, and I'm also a certified Title IX investigator, which means that I receive and investigate complaints of sexual misconduct, sexual harassment, gender-related violence, including stalking and intimate partner violence, as well as protected class discrimination and harassment and related retaliation. So I do want to turn it over to my awareness and prevention education student coordinator, Lena, to just do a brief introduction.
All right, can you guys hear me?
Absolutely.
Oh, thank goodness. I'm out in Green Bluff right now, so I don't really have too good of service. So I might, hopefully I won't, but I might drop the call. But I am a native of Spokane, born and raised here. This is my second time back at SCC. I was studying just transfer AA, and now I am in the paralegal program, and I am also studying at YWCA for the Triple LT. I want to help victims of domestic violence, and the Triple LT is a cheaper alternative to an attorney. Attorneys run about $250 an hour, and a Triple LT is about $60 an hour, and they can help give legal advice and fill out all the forms for anything related to family law. Basically, there's a few exceptions to that, but yeah, I am a survivor of domestic violence, and this is something that I'm really passionate about.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Lena. And we certainly want today's conversation to be a learning opportunity for our campus community. We want to remain respectful and to support the spirit of prevention education, as well as understanding the available resources and services. As a disclaimer, we do recognize that today's topic is sensitive, difficult, and it may be triggering for survivors or victims of relationship and other forms of sexual violence. We will provide information during and towards the end of today's conversation regarding both campus and community resources for support and for advocacy. So we're going to begin today's session with introductions of our featured guests and some remarks from today's featured resource, YWCA Spokane, regarding the background and mission of their organization. We are then going to discuss a few questions surrounding the culture of relationship and sexual violence and how to work towards meaningful culture change when it comes to the concepts of bystander intervention, recognizing signs of unhealthy relationships, and creating a trauma-informed culture of support and understanding surrounding the experiences of survivors. We'd also like to offer the opportunity for our featured resources to answer any questions from today's participants. If you do have a question for our featured guest, please type into the chat or use the raise hand feature, and we'll work to address your question as we move through today's discussion. So with that being said, I am going to turn it over to Gemma, who is our featured resource from the YWCA Spokane today.
Perfect, thank you. I'm going to, oh, this was the question I should have asked at the beginning. Am I able to share my screen?
You should be able to. Let me double check on that. But if you want to start with your introduction, I'll work on the screen sharing feature.
Yeah, perfect. So my name is Gemma Rydell. I am the Education and Outreach Advocate at YWCA Spokane. A lot of what I do entails talking to the community, educating them on the services that we have and the issues that we face. Oh, perfect. I can screen share now. Let's get that going. Awesome. Can you, let's see, is it going to go full screen for me? All right, can you still see it? Perfect. Yeah, so YWCA Spokane. Here I am. Here's my email if you also have any questions for follow-up after this. It's just gemma.r@ywcaspokane.org. A little bit more about YWCA. So YWCA USA's mission, and therefore our mission, is we're dedicated to the elimination of racism, empowering women, and promoting peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all. So to kind of break, we also have YWCA Spokane values, which we are in the process of examining and seeing if we want to add values or change values. Right now, one of our values is courage. We have the collective strength to face the biggest challenges and work towards a more just and equitable society that benefits everyone. The value of compassion. We believe that impacting lives begins with understanding individuals' needs. We listen, we learn, and we respond. And lastly, commitment. We are the oldest and largest multicultural women's organization in the world. And so we have always been and will continue to be leaders for women's empowerment and racial justice. To kind of break it down a little bit more, YWCA is actually a global movement. So you have YWCA Spokane, but then you also have the broader YWCA USA and YWCA World. As I said, oldest and largest women's organization in the world. We were founded in London back in 1855. And then YWCA World was officially founded in 1890. There are 20 board members, 2 from the US, 17 staff from 13 countries, 125 countries, 25 million women and girls worldwide. So that it's pretty neat to be part of such a big movement. To kind of bring it a little bit more locally, YWCA USA was founded in 1868. It established the first employment bureau and rooming houses for women. And the services and programs have been evolving and adapting over time to meet the changing needs of women, but I would also say to meet the needs of the community. So as you can see, there are 225 local associations. So like there's YWCA Spokane, there's YWCA Missoula, Montana, and each association can have kind of a little bit of a different focus depending on their community's needs, which I think is really important. For us here, we are the go-to place in the region for services that empower women and children. We have support for victims of domestic violence, work readiness resources, early childhood education, and drop-in childcare for women who are accessing our services. We were actually founded in 1903, so we've been helping the community for 117 years. We have approximately 75 employees, 60 regular employees, 15 active staff with on-call and work-study positions. We serve approximately 17,000 women, children, and families every year. One thing that I want to make sure I highlight is that help is always available through our 24-hour helpline. Just last year, we answered 3,635 calls from victims of domestic violence or concerned friends and family members. And here is that information. So what I think is pretty cool is we have the call line, but we also have a text line in case you're not able to place a phone call, and you can also email us. So we live out our mission and values kind of through 3 main umbrella programs. We have the Alternatives to Domestic Violence program, the Women's Opportunity Center, also known as WOC, and the Early Childhood Education and Assistance Program, or Ecap. For our counseling, we have last year, 11,886 survivors of domestic violence received counseling, safety planning, housing, and legal services that were necessary to help rebuild their lives. And we'll go into a little bit more detail on some of those later. We have our confidential safe shelter. So we help ensure the safety of our survivors by providing these services. Each year we have about 300 survivors and their children who come and stay at our shelter. A nice thing about our shelter that's different than some other places is that we allow survivors and their families to bring their pets. Sometimes pets are used to kind of have leverage over survivors, and so they don't want to leave. They don't want to leave their pets behind, for instance. Even in cases where we've had a survivor who had a horse, we would figure out a way to board their horse so that they could then be more empowered to leave their situation if that's what they chose. We have child and youth advocacy. Over 1,100 children and youth have received either trauma-informed care, so they've either witnessed or experienced violence in their homes, or they've attended some of our prevention education sessions, which talk about healthy relationships and warning signs for dating violence and things of that nature. We have our Safe Haven drop-in childcare. I kind of mentioned this a little bit earlier. So over 1,100 children are cared for at our free on-site childcare while their parent or guardian is accessing our services. So if it's job readiness, clothing, advocacy, or counseling. We have legal services, and through our criminal and civil legal advocacy services, we've helped over 2,500 victims of domestic violence navigate the legal system. Our legal department is here to help you fill out paperwork about domestic violence protection orders and help walk you through what a court appearance might look like, or family plans, things like that. Our Women's Opportunity Center, so our agency through this has helped over 2,100 women either develop new job skills or school readiness or just tools for success. For instance, we even have a computer lab, and since the COVID-19 pandemic, we've had to reduce the hours so that it's only by appointment only, but we still try to have that service available for our clients who need to access the internet or print a document or something like that. Our Sisters Closet is probably one of the biggest things that we're known for with our Women's Opportunity Center. So it's the only free clothing boutique for women here in Spokane. And women would usually do one-on-one appointments or just come to the store or store events or emergency services, which I can talk more on in a second. But through all of that, we've helped about 1,000 women each year. Unfortunately, our Sisters Closet is currently closed, and we're not even accepting donations at this time. So when I mentioned emergency services, some of our clients find themselves in very volatile situations. And so there may come a time when they need to leave their home with either what they can grab or just with their kids and what they have on. And so in an event like that, we can prepare basically an emergency bag for them that we keep here at our front desk, so that should they need it, they can come and grab it. And so we'll fill the bag with, a few outfits. So pants, skirts, shirts, socks, some hygiene equipment like toothpaste, toothbrushes. We try to throw in something for a little, like a self-care, either a nice face mask or a nice moisturizer, or some makeup. And so we get a lot of those items as donations, either from the community, from organizations like a dentist office has a bunch of extra toothbrushes, the single ones, or from like Project Beauty Share. They donate a lot of our makeup and cosmetics. We also have Ecap. So each year, over 900 preschoolers and their families are supported through our Early Childhood Education Assistance Program. So this is for families that meet a certain, I should say that don't meet a certain income level. And so this is free preschool for their kiddo or kiddos. And not only is it education though for the children, we also try to educate the family. We help connect them to resources. We talk about, things like nutrition, and it's just kind of an overall family package, if you want to phrase it like that. Family program would be better. So kind of to capsulize some of our services, so safety planning is a big one. That's when we sit down with our survivor and we talk about ways that they can make themselves safer at home. So there's no way to guarantee a person's complete safety from an abuser, but there are things that we can do and things that we can suggest that might make living at home easier and safer for them. Our support for children, whether it's counseling, and advocacy, or prevention, confidential housing and advocacy. So not only do we have our safe shelter, but we also do have housing advocates that can help people navigate their housing crisis. Counseling and mental health therapy, those are really big and important because we've found that survivors really can benefit from being heard. And so our counselors and our mental health therapists are here to help the survivor be heard so that they can heal and grow and progress into healthier relationships. Our legal advocacy, I kind of touched on. Financial resource navigation. So our CSO advocates are here to help people who might be on TANF, which is Temporary Assistance for Needy Families. And so they work directly with DSHS to help families get the maximum financial resources that they can. And then we also have other meaningful resources, and that kind of ties back into whether it's stuff with our job readiness, or we have a confidential mailing program. So survivors can get some of their mail sent to us and they can pick it up here instead of being sent to a home address where that could be kind of a security issue for them. I also wanted to touch on what an advocate does and doesn't do. So advocates do help with criminal and civil court processes. They do talk with victims about their safety and strategies to increase their safety. Advocates can also refer clients to others of our meaningful services. And they can educate the survivors and victims on the systems that are in place to help them navigate it more easily. And advocates also empower survivors to make their own decisions. That is super important. So as for the first, advocates do not tell victims what they need to do or force them into any kinds of services. So we are empowerment based. We want our survivors, our clients, to be the ones making the decisions, and we're here to support them along their journey. Advocates do not do things for the victims. So again, with empowerment, we want them to take that first step kind of thing, and we're here to help them. But the idea is when you've come from or you're in a relationship that has been dominated by power and control, getting your power back is just super important. So we're here to help survivors do that. And some resources on the left, you can find all of our resources. So whether it's that helpline again, our domestic violence support services number, our emergency shelter number, or national hotlines like the National Domestic Violence Hotline, the National Sexual Assault Hotline, and the National Teen Dating Helpline. Are there any questions at this time?
And Lena, I'm just checking the chat, but certainly for our participants on the call, feel free to jump onto camera if you'd like and unmute yourself if you do have any direct questions for Gemma.
Gemma, are your services open to all community in Spokane? Is it countywide or, I apologize, I might have missed that part in your information while you were presenting there?
Yeah, so I would say our services are open to all and everyone, whether or not, say, they live in Spokane proper or they don't. It doesn't matter. Also, our services are free for the most part, and we can work with, for instance, our mental health therapists work with insurance companies and have a lot of sliding scale options, things like that. We serve people whether or not they are English speaking as their primary language. We serve people regardless of sexual orientation, race, immigration status, economic status, age, all of that.
Thank you, Gemma.
All right, Gemma. So I know we did have just a few discussion questions that we're asking all of our featured resources this week, and I would love to get your perspective as an advocate and an outreach and education coordinator on some of these questions. So looking at our role as a campus community, being that we're at a community college, what can we do as a campus community to educate around a culture of healthy relationships, as well as appropriate and safe bystander intervention?
Yeah, so I think one of the most important things you can do is start the conversation, is to raise awareness, whether it's through events like this that happen virtually or in person after COVID, or it's things like having information available for students. I think training is super important. Training for staff, training for faculty, training for the students, just to get the awareness up.
And maybe to piggyback off of that, what type of trainings are offered through the YWCA Spokane to assist us in educating our students and bringing that awareness?
Yeah, so we are in the process of overhauling our training schedule and system, I should say. And actually, as a minor disclaimer, I started with YWCA I think it was about 3 months ago. And so the person who had my role has now left. And so we're restructuring a lot of things. I know in the past we do a lot of kind of domestic violence 101. So talking about, we call it the 3 R's: recognize, respond, refer. I know we've also done bystander intervention training. And then there's also been more specific trainings that have been developed for certain organizations. For instance, some of our advocates work with Gonzaga Law to do kind of trauma-informed training for them. And that is something that I think down the road that I will also be able to facilitate.
Wonderful, thank you. So I think our next question that we had is, we know that there's a range of negative issues and trauma responses that a victim or survivor of relationship violence may be struggling with following an assault or a pattern of relationship violence. What can we do as a campus community or as individuals to support survivors or victims in the immediate aftermath, as well as on a longer term basis?
Yeah, and so even that you've recognized, that trauma manifests in different ways is just super important. As far as kind of a larger structural as a campus, minimizing things like, for instance, when a survivor reports an instance of domestic violence or sexual assault, minimizing how many times, for instance, they have to tell that story, because each time they tell that story, it's going to be traumatizing to them, and it's going to be triggering, and it's just not going to put them in a very great place. So that's kind of on a bigger structural level, recognizing on a personal level that everyone experiences trauma in different ways, and that more recent traumas can also be affected by historic trauma and generational trauma, and that people, you can't really just check your trauma at the door. It comes with you into your classes, it goes home with you at night. And so kind of recognizing that and making services more accessible, for instance, counseling services, and raising awareness that those services are available, for instance.
Thank you, Gemma. All right. So I know we've spoken a lot about YWCA as a women's organization, but also supporting the larger community and larger community supports. So according to the research surrounding relationship violence, including intimate partner violence and domestic violence, we do recognize the larger percentage of intimate partner violence victims are women. However, men are also victims of relationship violence and abuse. How can we better disseminate information on resources and support and help men to become more comfortable speaking out about their experiences with sexual and relationship violence?
It's such a good question, and such a big question too, because this requires just a shift in our culture and in the dynamic that we have. And so the idea that, of toxic masculinity that says a man is this and that a man is not this, and that, to talk about your emotions is feminine, which is then equated to weakness, like that, the whole structure needs to be examined. And I think that one step towards that is through peer accountability. So when you hear your friend, no matter who you are, no matter who your friend is, if you hear your friend saying something disparaging about men or women or anyone, having the confidence in yourself to say like, hey, that's not cool. Or, why do you think that, if safe to do so for you? And so when we hold each other responsible and we make the very notion of, disparaging people, say for their sexuality or for things that they've experienced in their life, like intimate partner domestic violence, if we make that kind of that's not okay, I think we can gradually shift towards that better future. It's also about discussing like what is, how are these oppressive systems like the patriarchy, like toxic masculinity affecting us, even on whether it's, a national level or an international level or even a community level. How are, maybe even how are things phrased that might indicate, some biases, even on campus, whether it's in an application or in a class description or things like that. But yeah, this is a really big system change. And at YWCA Spokane, we do serve people who identify as male and men as well. But that's a big, we've had clients who are like, I kept quiet because I didn't know that you could help me. And that just breaks my heart, because we are here to serve the community. And the idea that some members of our community don't feel like they can approach us is very sad, and something that we need to do better on, and shifting kind of the lens. But one last thing, I have notes and I keep glancing down.
That's okay. Those all sound like amazing small steps towards a larger systemic and cultural shift. And
yeah.
Yes, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Yeah. The other thing I had in my notes is recognizing different forms of abuse. So everyone thinks domestic violence and they think physical abuse, but it's not just physical, it's economic, it's emotional, it's digital. And when we can recognize intimate partner domestic violence or domestic violence as those forms of abuse, I think it broadens how we think of who can be a victim and who can be a perpetrator. So for instance, in digital abuse, if your partner is saying, I need your social media password, or you need to text me a picture to prove where you are, or is constantly calling you, or things like that, that is a form of domestic violence, of intimate partner domestic violence. But just because you don't see, one partner hit the other person at the grocery store, that doesn't mean there's not something more going on behind the scenes.
Thank you for that insight, Gemma. And I think that's a really critical part of better understanding the various forms of relationship violence and intimate partner violence, and certainly information we want our students and our campus community to know about. So I really appreciate you sharing that. So moving into our last couple of questions, we also recognize the LGBTQIA+ community is also disproportionately impacted by relationship violence and abuse. Can you speak to this and share any information on available support and advocacy resources?
Yeah, so as I mentioned a little bit earlier, we proudly serve all in our community. And I do think that we as an organization can increase our visibility for the LGBTQ plus members of our community. I know that part of my job involved updating our statistics and our facts that we share. And I did find that we had a statistic that was being shared that wasn't completely untrue, but it was a little misleading about the rates of intimate partner violence experienced by members of the LGBTQ plus community. And even like something like that, the fact that we were sharing a statistic that was a little misleading, like that was something that I felt we really needed to correct. We also have recently published a blog post about ending violence against all WWMICs to kind of address the specific barriers that members of the LGBTQ plus community experience when it comes to intimate partner and relationship violence, but also when it comes to reporting these things. The fact that these systems, were not really put in place or designed to benefit them and that often hurt them. The fact that they are sometimes afraid to report because they don't think they'll be able to receive services, or they are afraid of violence from law enforcement officers, or being misgendered, or outing themselves, or all of these complexities that are kind of overlooked.
So certainly it sounds like there's cultural considerations within this as well of how we approach and how we best advocate for our diverse members of our community. So I think our last question that we had on the radar for you today, Gemma, is what is one thing you wish more people knew and understood about relationship violence?
It can happen to anyone. It can happen to anyone regardless of, economic status. So we think only, certain people can be victims. And so that's just not true. Anyone can be a victim at any point in their lifetime, whether or not, regardless of their age, economic status, sexual orientation, gender, race, religion, nationality. It can happen to anyone. It's the biggest thing I think people should know.
And I actually did think of one additional question that wasn't on our list for you, but I think just very timely and very pertinent to the kind of the existing world we live in right now. We are living in an unprecedented time with COVID, with isolation being more prevalent. What would you say the impact of the last 6 months of this COVID period have been, at least in your experience and seeing some of the rates in Spokane County? What would you say that impact has been on the prevalence of intimate partner and relationship violence here in Spokane County? And what can we do to, again, bring awareness and advocacy for the victims and survivors that are experiencing that?
Yeah. So abuse thrives in isolation. That's a big thing that we know. It's often used as a tactic of power and control. You get a person where they don't have their support network, and then it's easier to treat them in certain ways. And so because of the pandemic and because people, we're not going out and about, we're not going to work maybe, or we're not going to school, like they're missing these like touch points with other people, and they're missing these check-ins with people who could be concerned about their safety. And we know, like, just because we might not be seeing as many reports, that is actually more worrying, because we know that these things are continuing to happen at the same rate, if not probably higher. And so as far as what we can maybe do as a community, I would definitely say like checking in with each other and trying to keep that sense of community, that sense of connectedness through all of these hard times, I think is really important.
Absolutely. Well, I do want to open it up to any questions from our participants that we have on the call. And certainly want to thank you for all of the insights and all of the really great resources and information you've shared so far, Gemma. I think it's been really eye-opening and definitely a helpful education tool for our campus community. So again, if you have questions, feel free to add them into the chat, or feel free to hop on your microphone if you have any questions that we might not have covered with Gemma. And Gemma, I'm monitoring the chat as we're going, so.
Great.
Okay. I'm not seeing any questions pop up. Oh, let's see. Is Sister's Closet still open for visits? I think you might have addressed that a little bit earlier, but if you want to speak to that, that's a question that popped up in the chat.
Yeah, unfortunately, it is currently closed. We're not having clients go in just for COVID concerns and stuff like that. We do still provide emergency bags for our clients, though, who are needing those.
Okay, so there's still some form of distribution, just not the open space for them to come into right now.
And the great thing about our Sister's Closet when it was running is that the clothing in there is, it's quality clothing that they could use maybe for like a job interview even down the road.
And I guess piggybacking off of that question, how can we as a campus community or a larger community support those resources and services, like our Sister's Closet?
Yeah. As far as supporting like our services, having things like this, having information out there, even if it's just, like visit this website for maybe some more information and resources, can be super important. I know especially because of the pandemic, we've moved a lot of our things online, for instance. So we even have a really great Prevention at Home series. So it's a series of blogs and videos where people can learn more about things like how trauma affects the brain, about ways, red flags in relationships, about how to help your friend. And so those are some really great online resources we have.
Gemma, would you be able to share the link for those in the chat? Because I think that would be a great resource we would love to share out.
Yeah. So the best way to also stay up to date on our services, considering the COVID-19 pandemic, is by visiting our services webpage. All of our blogs, though, are individually linked, so there's not like one blog where you can find the other blogs. But if you scroll down to the bottom of one of the Prevention at Home blogs, like this one, How to Help a Friend, you will see the other. I think there are 10 in the series.
That's fantastic, and we're happy to share those out. Well, Gemma, I just want to say, as a prevention education coordinator, as an educator, as a survivor, and someone that has used the YWCA services, I, from the bottom of my heart, appreciate you taking the time to speak to us today and to share your experience with, again, supporting and advocating for survivors and victims of relationship violence, and just helping our campus community become more aware of those resources. We do also, and we've shared out earlier this week as part of our Action Week in Domestic Violence Awareness Month, we've shared out our campus-based resources on how to get help and how to help someone that may be experiencing it, and we have the YWCA included on that information. So we're certainly going to continue to promote your services and resources, and let us know if, as a campus community, we can be of any further assistance in helping to support your agency in moving on and moving forward.
Absolutely. And we do have a campaign going on right now called the Learn and Give campaign. And whether or not people can contribute financially, the learn portion is full of really good information. I can try to find that link really quick. So it's a series of either emails or blog posts, and it's structured through Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So we start with physiological needs and move all the way up to self-esteem. And so the structure kind of lets us tell the story about how it can be really hard to, to meet self-actualization, to find love and belonging if you don't know where you're going to sleep tonight, or if your safety needs aren't met.
Yeah, we'd certainly appreciate you sharing that link. I'm also part of the YWCA emails listserv, so I'm getting those as well. But no, we certainly appreciate you sharing that. And again, I think any tools or resources that can help us educate our students, our faculty, our staff are going to be really welcomed and helpful to us in continuing to promote this message and promote awareness on our campus. Thank you so much for sharing that link.
And I super appreciate you all for holding space for these kinds of conversations and getting these great resources out there to the people who might need them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I had a chance to share earlier this week, we did a session on Monday that was more specific to our student rights and responsibilities and what Title IX is and some of our campus-based processes. And what I can share is, just in the last academic year, 2019-2020, we had approximately 27 reports of Title IX related issues. And those ranged anywhere from stalking to domestic violence and partner violence, sexual harassment. And so we know that this is not just a broader community issue. We know that this is happening within our campus community with our students. And so I think it's a critical point. It's a critical juncture that we need to continue to educate and continue to have these conversations. So I'm just, like I said, I'm very grateful that the YWCA was willing to once again speak to our campus community and speak to the services and resources that you provide and that our students are able to connect with. So thank you so much for that.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Unless there's any additional questions, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.